The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
Believe it or not, another season comes to an end, as this will be our last show until Sunday, September 10th. I hope you all have a wonderful, happy, and healthy summer with your families, wherever your travels take you. I know I plan to do so. When we do come back in the fall, it will be with a great guest lineup, and that will conclude, believe it or not, our 10th season on the Volpe Report. For today's guest to end our spring season, we have Pennsylvania Representative Josh Kail, Republican from the 15th District. He is a member of the top Republican Leadership Caucus, serving as its important policy chairman. He has also been appointed by leadership to serve as the chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee, known as the HRCC. Those duties take him around the state to help elect Republicans to the Pennsylvania House, which is why he is in our media market and in studio today. Josh's district, on the other hand, is far west, covering Beaver and Washington counties on the Ohio border. Josh received his Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Geneva College, and then went on to receive his Juris Doctorate from the Regent University School of Law. Josh and his wife Abby have 8 children ranging in age from 12 years to 5.5 months, so he obviously is a man of great patience. We will talk to him today about Governor Josh Shapiro's budget and how the governor has pulled the old bait and switch by promising one thing in the campaign and delivering another in his actual budget submission.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Representative, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you for having me here, Chuck. I truly appreciate it.
Well, it's really a pleasure for us in this show. You are already sit in Republican Leadership Caucus. Is it the policy?
I'm the policy chair at this point in time.
Which is, for our viewers, I think they can figure it out. There's all kinds of leadership positions, but the policy chair, since that's what legislative bodies do, is policy end up becoming bills and laws. So as policy chair, again, at a young age, is rather amazing. And now you have the truest sign of a rising star to me is when they anoint you HRCC chairman, one of the younger ones, in my experience, for our audience, that's the House Republican Campaign Committee. So one of your chief jobs, which brings you into our media market, by the way, that's why you're here, you're around the state raising money for Republican candidates to take back the House. So my first question when I turn it over to you, and I want a little talk about your roots in a second, but my first question to you is, it was rather shocking in the result of last year's election. I knew there were going to be bad side effects to Doug Mastriano being our party's nominee for governor. He was not a good candidate. He lost by a record margin. And I've said in this show multiple times and did editorials that he took out, I believe, at least 3 U.S. congressional seats. And what I mean by that, Josh, is they were so close. The coattails of Josh Shapiro beat the Republican. 3 U.S. congressional seats we lost. And we even lost, you were a plus 12 in the House, Republicans, and now you're in the minority. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. But take it from there, how important your travels around the state to return a majority to the House of Representatives.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. If we want to drive a Republican, a conservative agenda in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, at a point in time when we have so much to lose here in Pennsylvania with bad policy and so much to gain with good policy, and not just in my area, southwestern Pennsylvania, but also northeastern Pennsylvania and south central Pennsylvania and southeastern Pennsylvania, we need to make sure we get that majority back. Last cycle, it was a little bit of a surprise for us, but I think it's worth noting that the Republicans on the ballot, as far as House members, had 400,000 more votes than the Democrats did on the ballot across the state. Now, where there was actually competitive seats was about 250,000 more votes than the Democrats did.
Wow.
So that goes to show you what happens when you have gerrymandered maps. When you have Democrats in control of the process of drawing the lines, it certainly puts us at a serious disadvantage. With that in mind, we are going to take back the majority next cycle. We still have a path to do it. It's going to be difficult, and we're putting the work in now to get it done. We're going around the state raising money. But I can't stress enough, we could talk about issues. We could talk about energy policy, tax policy, permitting reform, education policy. But nothing can get implemented unless we have a Republican majority in the Pennsylvania State House. And that's why we're working so hard to get that job done.
I have to add a postscript to your comments, and you said about, and I wholeheartedly agree, the map has been gerrymandered to benefit Democrats. But one of the little things that goes unnoticed, people in this market have heard me talk about it for years. The Republicans flat out in the state were not paying attention back in 2015, 2016, when for the first time in history, you had 3 Democrats sweep 3 Supreme Court seats in Pennsylvania. And the downstream effect of that has been so really catastrophic in a way. One, because they rubber-stamped Democratic Governor Tom Wolf shut down of Pennsylvania. And at a time the Supreme Court should have been following the Constitution and the laws, there was a provision where a joint resolution could have, after 90 days, as you'll remember, and they did do that. They actually took the power back. Well, the governor appealed to the friendly Democratic Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and they said, oh, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but it still has to go to the governor. The whole point of a joint resolution and to take emergency power back is to avoid the governor who is exercising emergency power. It was ridiculous. It took a constitutional amendment a year later, as you know, and you were involved in that. But so, again, back to that point. But the other thing the Supreme Court did, they're the ones drawing the map, because they keep saying every time when you were in the majority, the Republicans are gerrymandering it, so we're going to do it. And that map still stands, and I'm pretty sure in the Pennsylvania Constitution, it is the General Assembly that has the power to draw the legislative map.
That's right. And it's very important to note why it's the General Assembly. The General Assembly is the group of individuals that are the closest to the people. The Supreme Court justices are not very close to the people. They are elected, but there's 7 of them, and they're statewide. Not by regions, they're statewide. We have to answer to the people every 2 years. We make a bad decision that our constituents don't like, they can throw us out. Someone on the Republican side doesn't like what we do, we can get thrown out there as well. It's every 2 years we have to run. We have our ear to the ground. We understand what's happening. We are the closest group to the people. The state Supreme Court is the furthest away you can get in a Pennsylvania election because it's a statewide race. And it's very unfortunate because they've taken the posture that they're going to pick and choose which laws they want to apply. And then they're going to be the ones that draw maps. They took that posture, not just with our maps, but with congressional maps as well. If you recall, I think it was 2018, they determined that the congressional maps were unconstitutional, threw them out, redrew the maps, even though there's going to be another census done in a couple of years. Yeah, and they're going to do that. And that's when you had a situation where it created just a total fiasco in Pennsylvania politics 2 years before they're going to redraw the maps. That's just on the map side. We've seen them completely overstep their bounds during COVID, when they wanted to take up legislative initiatives, basically, and act like legislators from the bench.
They did.
And I think there's going to be serious consequences to that. Our system requires that lawmakers are the ones that actually draft the laws, because we're accountable to our constituents, and it gives our constituents a voice in the process. The governor is the one that applies the law. He's the one that makes sure that the law is being enforced, along with prosecutors in the criminal realm, which we're having a problem with.
I mean, in Philadelphia, Larry Krasser?
Yeah, and we're also going to end up potentially having a problem if we get the wrong prosecutor in Allegheny County. It's the court's job to interpret the law. The district attorneys, the governors, and the courts have all 3 of those groups have really become interested in the lawmaking process and picking and choosing what laws they want to apply without it going through the process. They're frustrated that they can't get their ideological initiatives done through the legislature, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is the legislature doesn't want them.
What's at stake in Pennsylvania and this country is significant. You're at the forefront of that battle in what you're doing, helping elect a conservative. And even if they're moderate, they at least follow the rule of law. and the Constitution is the rule of law that we live by, progressives seem to view that document as an amorphous, able to mend and mold and change as progressive times dictate, and that's, of course, not what that document is.
Yeah, they want to create this utopia as they see it. They want to create a world in their image of how they would like it to be. And I'll tell you, that's true. We have all those institutions working against us, but one thing we do have going for us is reality. And we have the truth with us as well. And you can see it in things like energy policy. You can see it in things like our tax policy or our views on what the government should and should not be doing. Right. It's policies that are grounded in reality, that are grounded and informed by what's actually happening. Not this rainbows and unicorns policy that we see from the left constantly that makes zero sense, and once it's implemented is a total disaster.
Again, we're here today with the policy chairman for the Republican caucus and leadership. He's also the House Republican Campaign Committee chairman, Josh Kail. And I have a view now that will appear, and we'll be right back after that view. As our season is now coming to a close for the spring, this will be the last view. I recently interviewed the United States Speaker of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, on his legislative triumph of getting legislation passed in the House, which ultimately became the bill signed by President Joe Biden to raise the debt ceiling and avert a national and worldwide economic crisis. The compromise deal scored numerous and significant spending cuts the President and the Democrats in Congress had previously said were non-negotiable. The total spending cuts will eventually total close to $1.5 trillion, that's with a T, in savings over the course of this decade, and will cut $1/3 trillion in just the next 2 years. What happened to Biden's boast for months that the Democrats, quote, were not negotiating the debt ceiling, end quote? That had been the White House narrative throughout the budget negotiations. Biden and the Democrats wanted an unconditional debt ceiling extension without any spending cuts. Obviously, the Democrats didn't get what they wanted. What they got instead were environmental Green New Deal cuts and education cuts, as well as significant cuts to the bureaucracy, with those cuts effectively deregulating much of the burdensome roadblocks to energy production. And then finally, $20 billion worth of cuts to the weaponization of the IRS. What happened? Question. From we are not negotiating the debt ceiling or tying spending cuts to a bill to raise it, to, in fact, doing exactly that. White House Budget Director Shalanda Young echoed the Democratic double shuffle from initially saying, take it or leave it, to, quote, they, congressional Republicans, have ideas, and we have to listen to them, end quote. Wow. I couldn't believe it as I read it. I will now quote from an editorial in the Washington Examiner by W. James Antle III as to why Biden and the Democrats capitulated. Begin quote. First, the White House and Democratic congressional leadership assumed McCarthy, who famously won the speakership after numerous concessions to conservative hardliners, would be unable to pass a bill of his own. But he did, and it ended up being the only debt ceiling extension to clear either Chamber of Commerce before the negotiations. This was part of a larger misjudgment of McCarthy, his ability to move legislation in the House, despite a small and fractured majority. Second, Biden had delayed talks for months, challenging McCarthy to pass his bill. When McCarthy did, the White House attacked those plans, so that once Biden reached the negotiations table, he did not have much time, and Democratic lawmakers were antsier about the fault. Finally, the negotiations sidelined Senate Majority Leader Schumer and House Minority Leader Jeffries. And while Biden and McCarthy were far apart on spending, other pressure points for additional spending or offsets through tax increases were marginalized in the process, pressuring Biden's desire to get a deal. If default happened, it was possible Biden would have to seek re-election during a recession, end quote. We know that's something he didn't want to do. The editorial concludes that of all the deals Biden has struck during his long Washington career, including as a senator for 36 years, the most consequential one, averting a financial collapse, was the one he had hoped to avoid. The Washington press corps reminded him of that. The press corps asked the following question, quote, "But that's what the Republicans wanted, is you to make a compromise on the budget. And that's what you've done. Isn't that right?" End quote, question mark. Biden answered, quote, "Sure, yeah. Well, can you think of an alternative? Question mark, end quote. No, we can't. Welcome back. We're here for the second half of our show with Representative Josh Kail, again, policy chairman of the Republican Leadership Caucus in Harrisburg, also the HRCC chairman, which means he's in charge of traveling the state, which is why he's in our media market today. And we're glad to have him appear in studio. But Josh, getting back to, I said, because we got talking in the first segment, our viewers, they've heard me give your background and your bio, obviously, but talk a little bit about the part of the state you're coming. And I have to acknowledge, because that doesn't even roll off the tongue in 2023, that at your young age, you already have 8 children. So talk quickly about
Yeah. So I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Pittsburgh region. My mother grew up in Beaver County. My dad, Brookline, which is South Hills of Pittsburgh. I'm one of 7. I have 6 siblings. My father is one of 12. His mother had 60 grandchildren. So there's a lot of Kails in southwestern Pennsylvania, in Beaver County, in Washington County as well, and still in Allegheny County. It's a big family, and it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved in politics, because growing up, I was the 5th of 7. I saw a lot of my siblings, in fact, at one point, all of them except one, leave Pennsylvania. And they left because they graduated college, and there was no opportunity here in Pennsylvania. And so they went to places like Texas and Georgia and Louisiana. And I have 8 kids myself now, and I want to see a day when they graduate high school or trade school or law school, whatever it is they decide to do, where they can stay here and pursue their opportunities in Pennsylvania. And we have the resources for that. We have the natural resources here to really create industry and reindustrialize. We have access to market, being so close to the northeastern part of the United States, being in the northeastern part, but also being close to major cities like New York and Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia. And we also have universities here that are world class. We have everything it takes to really take Pennsylvania to the next level, except a Harrisburg that gets it. And that's why I wanted to get involved in Harrisburg, and that's what motivates me. I want to see my kids be able to stay here in Pennsylvania because I love Pennsylvania, and I want to see them prosper here.
Now, Josh, again, we had mentioned and talked even a little off air. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Appropriations Chairman, Republican Chairman in the House, Seth Grove, kind of drop a bomb, in a way, in the interview. It shocked even me that our governor, who had gotten elected overwhelmingly, as we talked about, but made key promises to attract moderate and Republican votes, which he did. Yeah. Energy policy, you've mentioned several times. School choice, the voucher program in education, that he would support. He was going to not be for Reggie. Take it from there and talk about what's actually going on in the budget negotiations.
So I guess it's true that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. This last election cycle, Governor Shapiro took up a lot of our initiatives, things that we have been driving for years, and decided that he was going to talk about them and adopt them. You're right. It's energy policy. He talked about pulling out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is nothing more than an energy tax on consumers across the board. He talked about school choice, and that's something that the Republican caucus has been talking about for years, decades now. In fact, Tom Ridge was a major proponent of school choice. He talked about expediting the C&I tax cuts because they're supposed to be phased down from 9% to 4.9% over the course of the next 6-7 years. He said, no, I want to do it now. That's something that we had said, actually, as well. And then also permitting reform. Right. Remarkably, permitting reform has been, believe it or not, doesn't sound like the sexiest issue, but it has been one of our top issues for the last close to a decade now. And the reason is we can't have the development and the growth that we could have because we have Harrisburg bureaucrats getting in the way and taking years years to get a permit done. Just to make this and put this in the context, in southwestern Pennsylvania, U.S. Steel was going to invest $1.5 billion into a plant in Allegheny County. Their permit took over 2 years. It got so bad to the point where they said, you know what, we're going to Arkansas and doing their investment there. So Governor Shapiro understood that. He recognized that these were popular initiatives, that these were things that people wanted to hear, and he campaigned on them. And he won his campaign based off of these stances. And quite frankly, he has done none of it. In fact, not only has he done none of it, and the most egregious one, in my estimation, is continuing this energy policy, this energy tax that Governor Wolf got us into, this energy tax that Governor Wolf got us into, that we're still fighting. It's being fought in court. We fought it in the House. We're still fighting it in the House. Governor Shapiro had told many people behind the scenes that he is not for it. He had also stated publicly that he doesn't believe now is the time to go into it. And we were hopeful that he would follow through and say, okay, let's go a different course. This is bad energy policy. Consumers don't need another tax. We're already paying enough. However, when he released his budget, Tom Wolf's energy tax, the revenues from it, were in his budget. And so he says he doesn't want to implement this energy tax. However, he puts the revenues from it in his budget.
Right, which means there's going to be the tax.
He is going to implement the energy tax. That's his plan. It is not the Tom Wolf energy tax. It is the Josh Shapiro, Governor Shapiro energy tax. He has the ability to pull out. Right. If he wanted to pull out from it, he could do that. It's illegal for a governor, any one person, to enter into a tax, but that's being litigated, and that'll be determined by the courts. However, he could take us out of it tomorrow. Right. He says he doesn't want to be in it. He tells people behind the scenes that he doesn't want to be in it, and then he goes and puts it in his budget because I don't know what the reasoning is, if there's just too much political pressure that he has to do that. I think he's probably waiting to see what the courts are going to do with it so that he can not actually take a position on it one way or the other. But he is playing political games with union jobs. He's playing political games with consumers paying more on your utility bills. And it's not right, and it's unacceptable. When you say something to Pennsylvanians that you are for it or against it, and then you get into office, you got to follow through. Pennsylvanians aren't going to put up with that, and we're watching, and we're going to make sure that he does follow through, and if he doesn't follow through, that there's real accountability and people understand what's actually happening.
Well, on this show, Josh, earlier, right after his budget address, it was met with general approval before you read the fine print, I'll point out, from a progressive newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer. It was actually a story condemning him. And the quote I made reference to in the editorial was, "There is blood on the sidewalks of Pennsylvania from progressives biting their lips from their governor who has gone hard right," mentioning things like pulling out of Reggie, mentioning things like support for school vouchers, which are an anathema to the progressive. They're owned by the teachers' unions, pretty much. So, so even that to me is confirmation that what you're saying is true. So our audience doesn't think, well, people say stuff in campaigns. Well, no. If a liberal, a progressive newspaper is writing editorials about that, well, that means that is what he said, and that's what he telegraphed, and then he put things in his budget. But to Seth Grove's point, and now your point, Josh, it wasn't just he put it in the budget. He did it surreptitiously. So he didn't say, I'm pulling out of Reggie as he promised in the campaign. Reggie, again, for our viewers, I'll remind them, is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
An energy tax.
And
it is.
It's an energy tax. We have to bid with states, surrounding states, that have no energy production. They're going to determine how much energy we can take and then tax the energy we take from our own, against our own people. It is, well, I think unconstitutional, and that's why it's in court.
It is too.
But anyway, it's off.
And it's also the number one driver of investment in Ohio. Yeah. Ohio has had billions of dollars, billions. I just saw the map of it and the noted where the investments are. Since we went into this energy tax, since Governor Wolf started talking about it, now it's going to be implemented by Governor Shapiro. Since the Shapiro energy taxes has been talked about, Ohio has seen billions of dollars. And Governor Shapiro prides himself on being competitive and wanting Pennsylvania to be in a position where we could have those jobs here. If he actually wants that, if he wants to actually walk the walk with what he's talking about, he needs to get us out of the energy tax now. He needs to send a message to investors across the United States that Pennsylvania is open for business. It's more than just press conferences. It's more than glossy things that show up in the mail every 4 years or every 2 years. It's actually coming through. It's having the political courage and fortitude to disrupt the status quo. We're not going to have transformation and opportunity in Pennsylvania if there is no follow through on some of these promises that were made on the campaign trail.
The other thing is the more incidental detriments, things like, because we're paying more for energy and not producing enough of it, what happens is the bills go up. People can't afford to heat their homes.
So figure this out. And what other part of the economy do you pay more for something, which we're going to, for energy, receive a worse service, it's less reliable, and on top of that, not use our own sources here in Pennsylvania? We're basically subsidizing with this energy tax Chinese-produced energy. We're taking solar panels that are made in China and bringing them here so that we can, pay more for our energy bills. And by the way, we have the cleanest natural gas in the world right here in Pennsylvania. We have seen a further drop in our carbon emissions than any other state except Ohio over the course of the last 15 years because of our natural gas in Pennsylvania. We have the ability to take care of our environment, to take care of our jobs, to take care of our energy reliability, our grid reliability, and to have affordable energy. We just need to keep going down the path of using our resources, not have the government interfere like we're doing now with this energy tax, which it's absolutely critical for investment in the future, for manufacturing. I didn't get into manufacturing possibilities as well because the number 2 cost in manufacturing is energy. Of course. It's energy costs. So this is going to really hurt our ability to manufacture goods in Pennsylvania as well. We have so much potential here in Pennsylvania to really get the most out of our resources. The governor recognizes it. He recognized it because he campaigned on it. Now he needs to follow through and do what he said he was going to do, get this energy tax out of his budget, move the Commonwealth forward, and let's start talking about other issues that we can solve.
Yeah. And before we end, as our time runs out, I'm sure your message as you travel Pennsylvania to elect Republicans to the House is it'll help greatly in negotiating with the governor if the House is Republican. We already have a Republican Senate, but it'll also help in terms of leverage, in terms of those negotiations on budget items that you've enjoyed for the last 12 years.
Well, if the House were a Republican right now, by this point in time, there'd be a Reggie or an energy tax repeal on the governor's desk. And he'd either have to sign it or veto it and let everybody know. He'd have to make a choice.
Can't do that.
Can't do that. Once we get the majority back, we will ensure that he keeps up with his campaign promises. But until then, we're going to keep battling, keep going on shows like this, keep letting people know that we need to keep fighting to move this Commonwealth forward.
Well, I know people are listening, Josh, because for the last year and a half, they've been opening up their gas bills and their electric bills, and they're through the roof. So
it's going to get worse.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. And again,
anytime.
Thanks for the education for the people, because it's going to be true. You have one other thing. There are a lot of Democratic reps and senators in the southwest part of the state.
Yeah.
And up here, Democratic, which are going to have to answer to their constituents about their gas bill. So that,
and if they vote on this budget, if it still has those provisions in it, they're voting to implement the energy tax. The budget we just passed in the House, only with Democrat votes, had revenue from the energy tax in it. Those reps just voted on Reggie and implementing it.
We will be back a week after Labor Day in September with another bevy of guests. As the national campaign trail heats up, we'll be having more national guests and even presidential contenders, as well as the United States Senate race starts to heat up. That's another one on the docket. And then we'll have Josh back from time to time to update us on how the General Assembly is going, something that was lost in the past year as well.
Whenever you need me.
Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Thank you, Chuck.
Yep. Have a good summer.